Blizzard did contact me about 2 months ago and asked me for my opinion on some of the suggested changes they've had. I don't agree with the reasoning for this though. Free units should never scale with upgrades. That is stupid. Have I been living under a rock? Let's talk about War Prism. There was a lot of discussion, how can this be nerfed? You thought I'm gonna clap my hands? Not today. No clapping hands today. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. We just got a community update, well last night, but you know, I was sleeping. Community update July 1st, 2K19. So there's been some changes. I'm gonna go through everything. I'm gonna give you guys my opinion like always. As some of you know, Blizzard did contact me about 2 months ago and asked me for my opinion on some of the suggested changes they've had, which I won't be discussing because they asked me not to discuss specifics, but I can tell you guys what my suggestions were. So I'm not going to discuss what they initially wanted to do, but what I suggested to them as a kind of counter option, if that makes sense. And then we're going to discuss obviously what's in this thing. Hey everyone, over the past few months we've been tracking tournament results and following discussions around the TVP and ZVP matchups and the strength of Protoss in general. What we've seen from tournaments tells a somewhat mixed story. Overall, global tournaments win rates have remained close, with Protoss even arguably underperforming WCS circuit. At the same time, however, the most recent offline Korean leagues have seen unusually high Protoss representation. It's so hard to read English when it's not your native really fast. You eat a lot of words. Skip through them a little bit. While the results might paint a picture of Protoss strength, we don't believe they tell the whole story. Rather, what we find more concerning and what we are focusing on for our next update is how players view and talk about the Protoss matchups. In both TVP and ZVP, discussions seem to boil down to how binary either matchup feels. In TVP, while tank timing pushes feel strong, Terrans say they feel disadvantaged as the game progresses. True. In ZVP, while Zerg players struggle with scouting and responding to Protoss' various openings, professional level Protoss players often give feedback that they're the ones who are disadvantaged in the late game. True as well. As a general rule, we believe that it's perfectly healthy and even desirable that certain races have advantages over others at different stages of the game. Not true. That is terrible. That is not how the game should be, ever. I 100% disagree with this. That's not, no. No. Because then you cannot play your race, you cannot use the units you want, you are rather focused on using the units that will give you the quickest win if your race is bad in the late game. And if your race is good in the late game, then you skip all the early parts of your race because your race is good late game, so why would you bother with the early and mid game? I completely disagree with this. In a designer's ideal world, all races would have different types of advantages at all stages. Direct army strength versus harass potential. True, I agree with this, but you don't make it so that, oh, I just lose in the late game. I don't agree with that. I do agree that the races should be different. Like the Zerg should be the macro race, the Terran should be like the positioning race, and harass race or whatever. Because Protoss and Terran also have harassments, like good potential. And then Protoss should be like the power race. Takes long to power up, but it's powerful. I agree with that, but it shouldn't be unwinnable. The concern in the current metagame comes when players feel like there's a clearly identifiable point early in the mid-game when your advantage swaps from one race to another, and the race that perceives themselves at a disadvantage feels they have insufficient options to disrupt this outcome. True. With these principles in mind, we'd like to test some changes on the testing tab to gather feedback for an upcoming balance update. This time we'll be trying something new as we plan to release 2 sets of changes for testing. Oh, that's interesting. We believe both sets could result in positive improvements, but as they alter different aspects of the game, we're interested in your feedback before we determine what the best options are. Oh, I like that approach. I like that. The first and more experimental set of changes will be available tomorrow, and the second set of changes will be available for testing in the week of July 15th, so in 2 weeks. Terran. Now let's talk about some upgrades. I told you guys pretty much what I agreed up there, and I'm not going to go too in depth into it. Now we're going to go in depth into the changes themselves. Terran, Stimpack upgrade research duration decreased from 121 to 100 seconds. In the early Wings of Liberty, we increased the research duration of Stimpack upgrade in order to temper the strength of 3-racks openers in TvP, which at the time was difficult for Protoss players to defend against, especially at lower levels. True. Fast forward to today, where the addition of adepts and shield batteries, along with changes to Stalker's starting economy, have drastically altered the build's dynamic. Yes. That said, a common complaint in TvP is Terran's difficulty in punishing a fast Protoss third, and we believe a revert to this change could help to address it by creating new openers that Protoss will have to account for, allowing Terran to more seamlessly transition from tech-based openings to a bio-based mid-game, and perhaps most importantly, reducing the window in which the upgrade can be sniped. I don't know if that's the most important, but it helps, I guess. Our concerns surrounding the change revolve around overly increasing the power of 2-base timing all-ins in TvP as a side effect, and overly impacting TvZ, partly by affecting speeding up the timing at which combat shields comes online. Okay, so I don't think this impacts TvZ at all. Like, what timing is there in TvZ where you just kill the Zerg at a high level? Not really. Not really. It helps, for sure, but I don't think this is going to be like, oh my god, TvZ is now hard to hold off for Zerg. It's not going to be. TvP. Now, this is true. I actually, when I talked to Blizzard, I discussed and I said that 2-base Terran should be nerfed against Protoss, but obviously things would need to be compensated for that, like in buffing Terran later stage or something like that. Now, this is interesting move they went with. I like it for Terran because it does give you an option to suddenly go 3-racks, right? In like Wings of Liberty style. If you guys haven't played Wings, the way the Terran played back then was you open 1 barracks expand, you go into 3-racks, and then you go into like fast concussive shell and stim, and you just walk across the map. You catch whatever's on the map if you can with concussive shells, and then you just do a steam timing. And this is something that killed a lot of Protosses and was very strong back in the day because Protoss didn't have stuff that they do now. So the cool thing for Terran is this gives Terran another option, and again, like they say, makes the Protoss scared. Like, is Terran going for factory tech? Are they going for biotech? Now the thing is, if you open Blink Stalkers, you are going to defend this just fine, in my opinion, if you're on Terran's side of the map. What I mean by that, if you open 3-racks and you push without stim, let's say, if Protoss is on your side of the map, they're going to pick off so many units with Blink. By the time you get to their side of the map, it's not going to be worth, right? But Protoss will not know if you're going for factory or barracks unless they scout your base with an adept or something. So that's going to be a big thing if Protoss sees what Terran's going for. Now, this can be easily adjusted by Protoss opening with a sentry, like maybe a Stalker sentry opening, delaying the Blink by a little bit, right? But the hallucination is going to give you that important info that you're going to need to know how to play. Like, do I keep my Stalkers at home? Because against factory tech, you want to stay at home in case of drops, right? But against bio, you don't need to do that. You can just walk across the map. So it will be interesting to see how Protosses adapt to this. I also think that going Stargate tech will be more popular in TvP or PvT, because Oracle is going to give you so much info, and that's how Protoss is used to scout until they realize, oh, you don't need to scout, you can just go Blink, because what can Terran do? So this will make Protoss not play as decisive, and it will help Terran. Is it going to fix TvP? I don't think so. This specific change is not going to fix TvP. Same problems would remain, right? TvP, I would say TvP late game is fine with battlecruisers. I would even say it maybe favors Terran. But mid game, like 100 to 200 supplies where Protoss is very favored in my opinion, because of all the AoE and stuff. So yes, this will help Terran, but it doesn't solve that mid game and the economy part, because I do think Protosses will still be able to expand just fine with Blink upgrade or proper scouting and so on. On the other side, this, like they said, this makes 2-base Terran much more powerful. So this might break the matchup and improve the win rates for Terran, but not in the way they wanted it to, right? They're not, I mean, they're saying they're not making this to buff 2-base Terran, but you are buffing 2-base Terran. So, I don't know. I don't think this is a fix for the matchup. Again, people are going to be like, oh my god, this is a huge buff. What are you talking about? I'm not saying it's not a buff. It's just not fixing the core issues of the matchup. Maybe the Protosses will struggle with the 3 racks or factory, you know, which one it is for a week or 2 or a month, and then they're going to figure it out, and you're going to have same problems. Terran doesn't want to go later stages in the game. Protoss is going to be dying to 2-base pushes, and the meta remains unchanged. So, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of this path for this change, right? Not a big fan. I think there could have been better things to change and improve on to fix, quote unquote, the TVP matchup. Because I don't think it's necessarily about balance. I think it's about the meta game, the meta and just how the matchup plays out. And I do agree that TVP and ZVP are bad in a way of how they play out, not necessarily balance. Okay, Terran still. New upgrade. Enhanced Shockwaves. Increases the radius of Ghost EMP round from 1.5 to 2. Cost 150, research time 79 seconds. I guess this is in Ghost Academy. We receive a lot of feedback on why TVP is perceived Protoss favored in the late game, and a constant throughout is the raw direct strength of the late game Protoss army. We believe the proposed change will not only help Terran in direct engagements, but also shift the age-old zoning relationship between Ghost and Templar a bit more in the Ghost favor. Our decision to try this change out as an upgrade instead of baked-in improvement stems from not wanting to impact the strength of 3-base Terran all-ins in TVP. Terran 3-base all-ins in TVP? Do those exist? I mean, I guess you see it every once in a while. Or Templar-based mid-games. Even as an upgrade, will be monitored and effect of this change closely, as it would also impact the TVZ and matchup where Ghosts are already perceived to be a very powerful late-game unit. Okay. 1.5 to 2 doesn't seem like that big of a buff. Yeah, 1.5 to 2 doesn't seem like that big of a buff that I'm gonna research it. It's like plus 70%. How does the scaling work? Is it really that much bigger? If it's 70% on the size of... Oh yeah, because it's like a circle, right? Okay, so I'm thinking about this. From Terran point of view, the problem was never hitting the Templar with an EMP because their radius is a problem, right? Like, I mean, if you're in range to cast EMP, you cast EMP, right? I'm never like, if I just had 1 centimeter. Because you either cast it and your ghosts die, or you don't even get to cast it. I actually don't know how this is going to play out. I don't agree with the reasoning for this, though. This is not the core problem in PvT late game. I think what this will do is rather make Protosses go Colossus more, and we're going to see more Viking all-ins, especially with the stim upgrade and everything. I don't know how I feel about this one. I kind of feel it's weird. Like, if they made this change for TVZ, I would be like, yeah, I agree with that, because you can't EMP a lot of infestors at the same time. But doing this for TVP feels a bit weird. I mean, I would have to see it in game, and you guys are saying it's huge buff. And again, every buff that a race gets is good for that race, right? But is this the buff needed to fix what I just talked about in TVP in mid-game? No, it's not. I mean, we've already seen that Protoss has put their Templars in the Warp Prism. How's this gonna do anything to that? I mean, yeah, if you're stacking 8 high Templars on one spot, and now the EMP AoE is bigger, sure, it's great, right? But you need to research it as well? I mean, ghosts are already so expensive. Like, I feel like this is gonna affect TVZ way more than it's gonna affect TVP. And it will actually affect Terran EMPing Protoss army way more than Ghost EMPing High Templars. I don't think this is a good change. Again, it's a buff. I don't think it's gonna do what it's meant to do. I mean, Protosses at top level already put their Templars into Prisms. I don't like these changes. I don't think they're good changes. Yes, they're buffs, but they're not gonna change the game. The meta is gonna be exactly the same. Maybe Protosses are gonna go for more Colossus, Maybe they're gonna open Stargate to check out for scouting patterns, but the core issues will remain, which is 2 base Terran all-ins and mid-game that favors Protoss a lot. But hey, I might be wrong, but I don't think so. This is one of those where I'm pretty sure nothing's gonna change as far as the core playstyle of the matchup from both sides goes. Zerg. Infested Terran Infested Rockets. Damage decreased from 14 to 12. Yeah, boy. Now this is something that I pushed a lot for. This is how I was just like, the infestors need to be nerfed. Like, need to be nerfed. There's no, like, they're broken in ZVP and ZVT. Absolutely broken. They're free units that will destroy whole air army tier 3. Like, that just doesn't make sense. So it is a nerf. It's 14 to 12. Not a huge nerf. I don't think they'll be like unusable. You're still gonna have to run when you see them if you have an air army. But 14 to 12, you know, it is a nerf. So the feedback we've received surrounding Zerg's perceived late game advantage in ZVP centers a lot around Infested Terrans and their ability to fight Interceptors. As part of patch 4.0, we gave Infested Terrans a more powerful anti-air weapon precisely for this purpose, but after the carrier changes last year, we'd like to adjust the power of the Infested Terran accordingly. After this change, it'll take an additional shot for Infested Terrans to kill Interceptors at most upgrade levels. Now, the next thing they should do is remove upgrade scaling from Infested Terrans, and then I'll be okay with this unit. This is a start. Then removing the upgrade scaling on free units would be the second start. Free units, in no matter what game, StarCraft, Warcraft, PotatoCraft, free units should never scale with upgrades. That is stupid. Why does that happen? It doesn't make any sense. It's just, it makes no sense. No upgrades for Locusts. No upgrades, like, they should not affect free units. They're free units. It's insane. Imagine if auto turrets were scaling from damage upgrades. Do you know how many people would be spamming Mass Raven again? And also, why don't turrets have damage upgrades? It's a free unit. It doesn't make sense. Like, to me, free unit scaling with upgrades, 0 cents. That just doesn't make sense. Or, if you want to make them scale with upgrades, give them the carrier treatment, which make Infested Terrans cost 5 minerals. Like carriers, interceptors cost minerals now. They scale with upgrades, but they're not free. So, yeah, like make them 1 mineral, make them anything, just anything. It'd be fine. But in my opinion, free units should not scale with upgrades, or they should cost money and scale with upgrades. Carrier interceptor build time decreased from 11 to 9. Now this is something that, again, I also pushed for quite a bit, because I do feel like, you guys know, like I played random for the past year. I do feel like carriers are useless. You know, I troll a lot. People are like, why didn't you make carriers that game after I like won the game? And I was like, because I didn't want to lose. Carriers are just terrible right now because of the interceptor rebuild time. Now 11 to 9, it's a buff. I welcome it, and I'm pretty sure every Protoss player welcomes it because carriers are garbage. How it will affect the game, I actually don't know. This is something that, it's obviously a buff, but this is something that I need to play with. I actually didn't, when they initially increased the interceptor build time, I did know it's a big nerf, but I actually didn't realize at the time how bad it was until I played it. So again, I would need to play this and see how quickly the interceptors remake when you're actually playing the game. Like, can you do a fight, pull back, and have the interceptors ready for fight again? I don't know, but this is a buff that needed to happen because carriers are completely useless in all 3 matchups. For a tier 3 unit, they are just terrible. For similar reasons as above, we'd like to scale back the increase to the interceptors build time from last year's post BlizzCon patch. Combined with the Infested Terran change, we'll keep an eye how much the needle will move in terms of Protoss' ability to fight Zerg in the late game. And I also don't think this will change anything in TVP, because carriers are not that great in TVP, because Thors, Widowmines, Marines, Battlecruisers all deal really well with carriers. Nexus Strategic Recall cooldown increased from 85 to 130. While it's cool that Protoss can utilize Strategic Recall to reposition their armies between their bases, we believe they can currently do so too frequently. This change is intended to more punish Protoss players who are consistently out of position against multi-prong harass. This is something that a lot of Terran players specifically complained. The Nexus recall just being too quick. Like, you do a Doom drop, Protoss recalls. You leave the base, you gather around your units, you do a Doom drop, Protoss again gets caught off guard. No problem, recall, right? So honestly, I do think this was needed because it was a little bit too much of recalling, because it felt like in pro games, again, I'm not talking this, when I talk about this, by the way, I'm not like, ooh, nice, I'm gonna win ladder games. It doesn't matter. I play random, so whichever way the game goes, it doesn't matter for me. I'll adjust my playstyle and that's it. I just want to get that out of the way. At pro, like high level, it's incredibly hard to get Doom drop into the Protoss base. And right now, I know from talking to Terran players, and you know, when I play TVP as well, but again, I'm not at the level of those guys, it feels very unsatisfying and unfair where you get the Doom drop in the Protoss base and it's like, oh, recall. And then you're like, oh cool, I forced a recall, so next time I can do insane damage. And then you do it next time and then there's another recall. And you're just like, what's the point of Doom dropping? Like, there's no point, because they always have recall. Because by the time you manage to get another Doom drop later on, it's back, and it kind of feels that Protoss is just not punished for playing sloppy, not scouting enough, or not having units in position to defend Doom drops. So I think this change is good. For ZVP, you don't really use recall in ZVP too much. I mean, you recall like a Prism if it's stuck behind a mineral line in the main base, or if you see Zerg all-inning, so then you recall. But I don't think it will affect PvZ too much. Moving on. Warp Prisms no longer start with Warp Conduit, passive ability, and warp pins will take 11 seconds when not near a warp gate or nexus, up from 4. The Gravitic Drive upgrade now has a national functionality of granting Warp Prisms the Warp Conduit passive ability, reducing warping time from 11 to 4. Let me read out their thought process behind this, and I'll give my opinion, because this is the biggest change in all like seriousness, right? Currently, the discourse surrounding ZVP seems to center primarily around the number of powerful early game Protoss openings. Not only does Protoss have a high number of tech options, they also have many variations of Immortal all-ins that require different responses. Though we believe all these attacks to be theoretically defendable, I mean, in theory, one SCV can kill 50 Marauders if they're not shooting, but I don't like when people use that term. Like, in theory, you can win. Because it's like, well, we're not... That okay, never mind. The margin of error for the defender might be too low. There are a few ways to address this, such as improving Zerg early game scouting or weakening some of Protoss's early game options. For the first iteration of the testing tab, however, we'd like to try a more experimental change intended to reinforce the concept of Defender's Advantage in all Protoss matchups. Defender's Advantage is a tricky thing to balance in an RTS, as shifting it too much in favor of the attacker creates overly aggressive games. I don't think this is really true. You could have just copy-pasted the Brood War Defensive Advantage, maybe make it 50% of chance miss if you're shooting on the high ground, make the natural base on the high ground, and that's it, there's your defensive advantage. Like, you don't have a defensive advantage if you're fighting against a Warp Prism that warps units in your base. Like, what defensive advantage do you have? Defensive advantage only exists against Terran, and more or less against Zerg, but their units are extremely quickly and can reinforce in masses. Meanwhile, shifting... I mean, I'm not up for making, shooting uphill have miss chance of 50%, but there are ways to do it. Meanwhile, shifting it too much in favor of the defender results in more turtle situations. Currently, we believe PvZ in a state where defender's advantage is not sufficient for the Zerg player in the early game, when scouting can often be limited to a Zergling running into the Protoss army, exiting their base. Oh yeah, true. Because of the short response time and Protoss's fast warp-in mechanics, the sum of Zerg's defender's advantage at that point may not be enough. Another example of low defender's advantage in the PvP matchup, where both sides have to have access to similar reinforcement time with gateway units. While the defender has better access to Stargate and robotic unit reinforcements, gateway units have become more powerful over time and thus better equipped to deal with low number of high-tech units. We believe this can inhibit players from feeling safe enough to invest in establishing more bases over more units. With these changes, we believe games are more likely to pass the 3 base mark, and robotics-based play would become more common. I mean, you can just proxy a gate with a pylon, especially against Terran. For all these perceived benefits, we acknowledge that this is one of the riskiest mid-year changes we've ever proposed. First and foremost, we are concerned that this change might be too heavy-handed and would overly neuter Protoss all-ins. Neuter. I like the word neuter, it's a funny word. And while this change more directly and obviously hurts Protoss all-ins, it also weakens macro play, both by reducing the threat of potential attacks and reducing the strength of warp and harass. In PvT in particular, we also have concerns that this change would further push Protoss towards the already very popular robotics bay openers. Have I been living under a rock? Is TVP extremely popular to go robo bay? All these concerns notwithstanding, even if this change does not make the final cut, we think there is value in spurring discussion with the community. We look forward in hearing what you have to say, not only about this change, but about the entire package proposed today. I think they're talking about Immortals, but no one opens Immortals in PvT. I thought that most people open Twilight, and we've seen a lot of Stargate recently. Robo Bay Disruptor is meta, isn't it? No. Observers? Robo Bay is not Observer, though. That's Robotics Facility. They're saying Robo Bay is extremely popular. I feel that Robo Bay openers are terrible. Wait, is Robo Bay is the thing unique for Colossus, right? Yeah, Robotics Facility is Robo. It's extremely popular in lower leagues, but they can't balance the game by talking about high level and then low level. Like, no one opens Robo Bay at high level. You open Blink into Robo with observers, into a third, into Forges, into Robo Bay or Storm. I mean, so they say. We also have concerns that this change could further push Protoss in already very popular Robo Bay openers, but you also buffed Ghost against Templars. Of course it's going to push people into more Robo plays. And then it's going to push Terrans into Viking all-ins, and then you're going to have the repeat of Heart of the Swarm. That's how that works. That's why I'm saying these changes are not good. Like, they're not solving the issues of the matchups at all. I want to say something. So, I did discuss a lot of the changes with Blizzard. And only 2 changes in this whole list are made that I was pretty sure they're going to implement, and they're testing them. The other changes I was never asked for. Maybe they've discussed it with pro players, I don't know. But all of these are very new to me. Now, they did say there's going to be a second patch testing, right? Which I think honestly, I think that the second part will be way better changes. If this is the first part and then they're like doing the second set of changes, I think that one will be way better if they change the things that I know that they wanted to do. Let's talk about Warp Prism. Warp Prism is another unit. So I'll tell you guys what things to kind of just put in perspective, what kind of things I was for nerfing, because at the end I kind of gave my opinion to them, what I think should be changed, and maybe they should discuss it with other people. I'm going to try to remember from what I've talked about, because I'm not going to look it up now. I've said that infestors need to be nerfed, carriers need to be buffed, War Prism needs to be nerfed. I said that Terran 2 base pushes need to be nerfed. Protoss has too much freedom in their games against Terran. Like, they don't fear anything. The harassment of Terran is really poor against Protoss right now. Not in a way of how much damage you can do, but Protoss just knows what you're doing, and that's why they go Blink openers, because they can kill everything. Those are the main things that I thought were the big issues. I also said that Ravens in TVT are kind of ruining the matchup, and Terran lacking AoE damage. Mines are strong against Protoss though. Mines are terrible at high level. Like, you get a good shot every once 30 games maybe. Now, the War Prism. So there was a lot of discussion, how can this be nerfed? There were discussions by reducing the health of the War Prism, increasing the cost, reducing movement speed, this change, which again, I did not know about. There's a lot of different options to go about nerfing the Prism. I'm gonna talk about, like, these are not the changes that I've discussed with Blizzard specifically, but these are the changes how I'm thinking, like, how you could nerf the Prism, right? So let's go through it, and I'll just give my opinion, because I think Prism right now is probably the biggest issue in the game, if I could pick one thing. And yes, I do think, I just want to say, if the Prism gets nerfed, Protoss needs to be compensated, especially against Zerg, because Protoss is heavily relying on timings against Zerg, and if they don't hit a timing or do damage or kill Zerg, they're dead in the late game. So I just want to get that out there, which is why I was also for nerfing Infested Terrans, and also why I was nerfing for nerfing Terran 2 base against Protoss. You can go by reducing the health. If you reduce the health by a little bit, the Widow Mines one-shot Prisms, and I think that's just stupid. I don't think a War Prism should be one-shot by a Widow Mine. I don't think the problem of the War Prism is its health, right? It's not like, oh my god, if it had 20 health, this game would have been fine. So I think nerfing health or nerfing shields is that's a bad change. It doesn't solve anything. Second, you can decrease the movement speed. I don't think it solves anything either. If the Prism gets in your base, it gets into your base, and you have same problems all over again. If the Protoss is all in with a Prism and 8 gates, charge lot immortal, doesn't matter that the Prism is slower, sure, it's a nerf, but the Protoss can still juggle the immortals. Nothing will really change in the end, right? Like the results will be the same. You can increase the cost of the Prism. Would this change anything? No. It's a nerf, yes. Let's say you make a War Prism 250 minerals or 200 minerals and 50 gas. It's a nerf. It will delay the Protoss all-in by... And then you have the same problems, which is the pickup range, the immortal juggling, and the warping in. So there's two changes that are left over that you can do. One change is increasing the warp in time to the War Prism. The other change is what I was for, which was reducing the pickup range of the War Prism by 2. What is the pickup range now? 6 or 7? I don't know exact numbers in game. I think it's 7, right? 6? Okay. I can't remember right now. I'm really bad with numbers in StarCraft 2. My idea and my suggestion was nerfing the War Prism pickup range by 2. This would fix all the problems that the War Prism is causing. It would still be insanely good, but it wouldn't cause these issues that we have right now. Why? Because by nerfing the Prism pickup range by 2, the Queens will be able... You can still juggle stuff, right? You can still do Immortal Harass or Immortal Push and juggle your Immortals. You can still do the Archon Harass, but the difference is the Queens will be hitting your Prism, which right now, at a high level, I mean, watch the games, the Queens cannot hit the Prism. They just can't. The Prism is always out of range. So the Protoss harassment is free, but it's not free in a way like, oh, Zerg's out of position. Even if when the Zerg is in position, if the units drop off, you can't touch the Prism. Behave in the chat, I'm gonna ban everyone. Nah, I'm joking, just half of you. I think that's the real issue. Also, we started seeing a lot more PvT, like 3-gate, or at least that's what I've been experiencing, and I think Zest did it as well. Like 3-gate Robo, 4 Stalker, and then warping in 3 more Stalkers in Terran base, and then just juggling Stalkers with a Prism, making them like they have Blink. And you do that insanely quickly, and if Terran, doesn't respond super well, you can die to it. And that is the problem with the Prism. It snowballs insanely well against Terran, and then against Zerg, it's untouchable in the hands of a good player. Yes, I do think charge lots are insanely strong, and Immortals are immortal, but if you can actually catch the Immortals, those all-ins would become much weaker. The problem is you can't touch them. The Zealots kill the Zerglings, you can't get a surround on Immortals, and even if you do, you just get lifted off. The Zealots block off the Roaches from approaching Immortals, and then the Immortals just kill the Roaches, and then the Queens cannot kill the Prism because it's just out of range, because it doesn't need to be in the range of the Queen in order to pick up your units. So that was my suggestion for the War Prism. Now, in the second part, in 2 weeks from now, they might nerf the War Prism range. I don't know. But I do think personally that would be the best way to go about this. Protoss would keep their War Prism strength, that you can warp in a bunch of units, but this kind of juggling for free making the Prism untouchable and unkillable, I don't think it's I don't think it's good for the game. The option they went with is, I gotta say, I think it's a bad one. I mean, again, these changes are not final. The warp and change, this is not nerfing the Prism. This is killing 2-base all-ins. This is a big nerf to where you're not, this is the problem. You're not just nerfing the 2-base all-ins, you're nerfing War Prism across every matchup in every situation. I mean, who's gonna make a Prism now? You're not gonna make a War Prism go into the Terran main base and warp in 5 Zealots. You're just not. I mean, it's gonna take 11 seconds to warp in. And putting the upgrade on RoboBay is just like, sorry Chief, like that's just not gonna happen. Who goes RoboBay in PvZ? Going RoboBay in PvZ just to get the upgrade, it's 150, 150, and then upgrade is 100, 100, 250, 250, just to get the War Prism to where it is now is something that's extremely expensive and people are not going to do in PvZ when they're doing the 2-base all-ins. So effectively, they've nerfed 2-base Protoss all-ins hard against Zerg. While I don't think there's this nerf is so big that I don't think there's enough for the Protoss to kind of shine in the late game against Zerg, if that makes sense. I just don't think this is a good change. Like, this is not something you're gonna rush into and then you're gonna do a timing. This is something that you're gonna get, like you're making Colossus in PvT and you're like, okay, might as well get this, right? Because it's gonna make my warp-ins faster. I feel that I do enjoy Protoss Race being played with Prisms and Prisms being dangerous and you harassing with them. But having this change completely changes the role of the War Prism to almost just bad until later in, almost unusable until later in the game, and it makes Protoss way more campy. So you're gonna see games where Protoss just is on their side of the map, Zerg and Terrans are on their side of the map, and Protoss is being defensive and just not harassing because you can't warp in units into opponents' bases. Like, there's no threat. You're not gonna see this upgrade in PvZ because there's no Colossus stop builds in PvZ. You see some rarely, but not really. Now, if they want to take this approach, I personally would suggest putting a Warp Prism maybe on like a 6-second warp in. Seven's too much already. 6-second warp in. But again, I don't think this solves the ZVP issues. Like, the pickup range is the problem. That's it. But if they had to go with this option, I would suggest remove this upgrade completely and just make it so that the units next to or pylon next to the gateway or nexus warps in units in 4 seconds. Pylon without warp gate or nexus next to it warps in 11 seconds, or how much it is that right now. And then Warp Prism warps in units in 6 seconds. So that there's a kind of incentive for you that if you're doing a push to bring a Warp Prism instead of just making a pylon, but you can't really make a gate because that's gonna take too long. And also it would nerf the in-base warp-ins, which I personally don't think it's a huge deal. I do think they're annoying as hell, but I don't think it's a huge deal. And I don't think it will fix the ZVP issues. And by making this change, like I said, you're nerfing other parts of the game when it's not needed. Like, if your sole purpose is to nerf one specific moment, which is the ZVP 2 base, you go for the pickup range. That is the issue. That's my opinion. I mean, we'll see how the Terran changes play out. I'm sure if this goes through live, you will see a lot more 3-Rax openers. The core of the matchup, I don't think will change. 2-base Terran will be even stronger. Zerg, good. Carriers got buffed. Nexus Recall nerfed, good. And then the Prism, I'm just not sure about this. I don't think this is good. It will also slow down the game a lot in Protoss matchups, so it will be like more resident sleeper to watch the games because there will be less action. Because I do like the action-packed, Prism and then Link Run Bys and then Terran drops or PvP. There's Prisms on both sides of the map, micring and so on. And at the end of the day, Protoss can, if they play against Zerg, they can go for Pylon and Proxy Gateway and hope that it doesn't get scouted against Zerg and then skip Robo completely and just go 8-gate charge lot with Proxy Gate. I mean, it's not going to be as good, but going to bypass this. Overall, okay changes. Not fan of the direction they're taking, except these two. Again, these changes are not final. They might change them more in the future. And that's it. that is it. I would love to hear your guys' opinion right now in Twitch chat. If you're watching this later on YouTube, let me know what you think. For the people on YouTube, thank you guys for watching. Here's the clap from the start, and have a great day.